and educational advancement. Many are ready to give back to their cherished nature island. Welcome to Root Connections on Q. Join Dr. Simone Matthew on Q95 as we tap into the life and times and expertise of our nature island Dominicans at home and abroad. From our agriculture and industry to sustainable development, resilience and renewable energy to the music, art, and entertainment industries. Join Dr. Simone Matthew and guests every other Wednesday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. We examine where they came from, where they have been, where they are now, and how we can move forward together with our brothers and sisters at home and abroad to inspire and elevate our country, our economy, our people, and our youth to achieve excellence and success. Roots Connections on Q, every other Wednesday night, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Only on Q95, the big station.
Jacob is calling his children. Where the price, so we walk.
Good evening, Dominica. Good evening to you, wherever you are joining us from. Good evening to you, and welcome to another episode of Roots Connections on Q, right here on Q95, the big station. As you already know, this is our #1 program for navigating a world where change is the only constant, where we feature our Dominican and Caribbean experts who make themselves available to provide us with guidance in this rapidly changing world. And how do we do this? We do this by harnessing the power of technology, international radio, social media, and podcasts as we continue to leverage the skills and talents of our Dominican and Caribbean experts for the benefit of us all. So today we have another packed program for you. We are joined by not one, but 2 immigration attorneys and a professor of political science as we look at the very important and relevant topic this evening. And that is, we're going to look at the U.S. immigration crackdown. We're going to be answering your questions and your concerns, and we're going to be looking at the implications for our communities. As always, we look forward to hearing from you, our loyal audience, whether you join us on the radio and you call in, or you join us on Facebook and YouTube at Q95 FM Radio and Push Past 10. We're looking forward to hearing from you on this very important topic because we know that many of us have concerns. So don't forget to share the live and click on the notification button so you will always know when Q95 FM Radio and Push Past 10 on Facebook go live. We continue to witness how quickly the world around us is changing and evolving. So here on Roots Connections, we are committed to looking at the changes we should be concerned about, the changes we should be taking advantage of, what changes we need to make in order to move our island and our people forward. So tonight's program is definitely about a very urgent change that is going on right now, and one that everyone is very concerned about. So let us say another very warm welcome to you. This is episode number 85 of Roots Connections on Q for today, February 12th, 2025. And I am your host, Simone Matthew. We are very grateful to be joined this evening by attorney at law and owner of Charles Law, Mrs. Portia Charles Collaz, as well as attorney at law for immigration, Miss Tamika Jude. And if you're on Facebook, you know Tamika very well. She goes by Tika on Facebook, and she continues to educate us on Facebook all the time. So, and again, we have our political science professor, a man who needs no introduction. Mr. Alex Bruno is here with us this evening. So we want to say very much, we want to thank them very much for taking time out of their busy schedules to be here to guide us on this important topic. But before we get started, we always want to remember to pray for our country, Dominica, and to pray for all of us, because it seems like no matter where we are in the world right now, we are facing challenges. So we want to continue to pray for each other. And we also want to continue to be grateful because besides the challenges, at the end of the day, we woke up this morning, so we have to continue to be grateful. So let's give a warm welcome, a warm Roots Connections welcome to our guests as we invite them to unmute their mics and just tell us a little bit about who they are and more information about their professional lives, a little bit of information of where they're from in Dominica, this being Roots Connections, their roots to Dominica. So I'm sure, Alex, you won't mind if we do ladies first. So let's go ahead and start with you, Portia, my neighbor from Baffin State. We were just talking about that we haven't seen each other in about 30 years, but we did grow up in the very industrious neighborhood of Bathurst. So Portia, nice to see you again, my friend, and tell us a little bit about you.
Certainly. Good evening to everyone. Good evening to the other guests. Miss Jude, I haven't met you, but it's a pleasure. And Mr. Bruno, it's a pleasure as well. I left Dominica in 1995, which is a very long time ago. As Simone says, I grew up in Bathurst State, the area closest to Emsall. I went to St. Martin's School, grammar school. I have to say I had an excellent childhood in Dominica. But for the past 30 years, I've been living in Boston. I've been an attorney for the past 12 years. I practice in immigration, criminal law. So I'm here tonight to share my thoughts and enjoy the conversation.
Yes, thank you very much, Portia, for joining us. As a matter of fact, you know, the minute I reached out to Portia, she immediately said yes. So I want to just continue to thank our guests tonight, as well as everyone who continues to make themselves readily available to give back to Dominica. So Tamika, Miss Tika, good evening. Welcome aboard. Tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tamika Jude. I am called Tika or Attorney Tika. I am from, well, I started my life in Tetmon, Granby, but I then moved to Wall House. So I lived in Dominica up till the age of, I think, 18 before I left. I am currently an immigration attorney. I founded Jude Law LLC, which is my law firm. I have been working with immigrants from the time I started practicing law because I kind of just didn't want to work for anybody. So I decided to work for myself from the jump, and I've had a thriving practice since. And I am happy to be here. I had many people asking me to be on shows, and Simone was the one who got me soonest. So.
Yes, and I also want to thank Tamika because this is actually not her first appearance on Roots Connection. She joined us, I think it was back in 2023, when we were talking about how everything is going digital and a lot of processes involving law are now going virtual. So Tamika, thank you for joining us then, and thank you for joining us here. I know you're going to give us a lot of great information that we can use this evening. And of course, the man who needs no introduction, Mr. Alex Bruno. I'm not sure how much of an introduction you can give that we already don't know, Alex, but please feel free to share your introduction at this time. I think you're breaking up a little bit, Alex. Yeah, Alex is going to be off camera for the first part of the program. Try one more time, Alex. Oh boy, I think he's having a little bit of technical difficulties. So Alex, whenever you're able to, just feel free to jump back in on the conversation. Try again.
Can you?
Yes, try one more time. Your audio is working fine before we started.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I mean,
okay, you're good.
I have full signal. All right. So I want to say thank you for inviting me and to the conversation. Connected. I am from Calibishi, Woodfordale. I grew up in Calibishi, migrated to Roseau when I was a teenager, and of course I did my house, and so and tried to move to the US toward the end of the 1980s. Didn't quite, and I eventually, about 15 years ago, I am political science, and I'm enjoying it. Simon, this is not my first rodeo with you, and I think tonight's conversation is going to be good. I'm looking forward to it, actually.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And I think, Alex, you've probably been one of the people who's joined me the most often with the programs that I do. So I want to just thank you for your unwavering support and your commitment, not only to this program, but to Dominica as well. So again, welcome to Roots Connections right here on Q95. We say good evening to Mr. G and the Q95 family, Lambi, Sherwin, everyone who contributes to this program in one way or another. Thank you for being here and thank you for all that you do. So again, if you're just joining us, you tuned in a little bit late. You're listening to Roots Connections on Q, and today we're going to be unpacking the immigration crackdown and kind of just looking at the implication for our communities, our immigrant community. So what I wanted to do right off the bat is to engage our two immigration attorneys as they provide us with some guidance to help us to understand, how does one become a legal resident of the US? So what are the different options, the different pathways in the immigration process to become a legal resident of the US? So any one of you can feel free to jump in and start the conversation.
Okay, I guess she's muted, so I guess it's me. I mean, there are so many ways that we probably would be speaking all night because we have visas all the way to an S visa. So U visas, T visas. But what I will say is, in a nutshell, there are employment-based options, family-based options, and humanitarian-based options. So under humanitarian, you'll have things like asylum, T visas, U visas, VAWA. Family-based, you would have petitions by parent, child, spouse, sibling. Humanitarian, I missed one, which is special immigrant juvenile status. And then under the employment umbrella, you would have things like the EB2 NIW, which is a non-national interest waiver. There are other types of H-1Bs and stuff that can eventually lead to permanent residence. And of course, the investor options do come under the business umbrella. I'm not sure if Mrs. Charles Collaz wants to expound, but I know we can talk for an hour on the different.
Certainly. Well, immigration is very intense. There's different sides to immigration. And actually, not every immigration lawyer is an expert in every single part of immigration. Sometimes there are little nuances in immigration. Like, for instance, one of my nuances is religious visas. I don't necessarily do a lot of employment or business immigration. I tend to focus on family immigration and deportation defense. So if we're talking about different ways that people can become permanent residents, I would tend to focus more on family immigration. That is typically the most common one, unless you have some type of connection with a corporation. Most people tend to inquire about family immigration. And one thing I would just point out is there's a distinction between US citizens petitioning for their family and a legal permanent resident petitioning for their family. For example, if you're a US citizen, you can petition for parents, for spouse, minor children, married children, things of that sort. If you're a legal permanent resident, you're not able to petition for your parents, but you can petition for your spouse and your minor children and unmarried children over 21. So it's kind of important to make those distinctions.
And I think because, again, you guys are correct that there's so many different options. So what I want us to focus on this evening are the options that many in our communities usually select, and then kind of just walk us through the process. So we know in our situation, many times you have maybe a parent file for a child, or a child file for a parent, or a work visa, where you become legal in this country through your employment. So what, in your opinion, are the most common options that we see for our communities? And then kind of just walk us through the process of what that looks like.
I can jump in. So generally, in my practice, I generally see parents filing for children and spouses filing for each other. Is generally what I see. There's two different ways to migrate. One where if the person is already in the United States, they can adjust status in the United States. If they entered the United States with inspection, they are able to change their status to legal permanent residence. And there's a different group of people, if they're still in the home country, they do what you call consular processing. So essentially they have to do an interview in one of the consulate, whether it's Barbados or if they're from another country, maybe Trinidad or Jamaica, and they have the interviews at the consulate, and then they enter the United States as green card holders. So there's two different ways, and the process is different in both instances. In my experience, if you're doing a one-step adjustment, if it's based on marriage, you generally have an interview. If it's a parent filing for a child, sometimes you may not be asked for an interview because those relationships are easier proven, so you don't necessarily have to have an interview. If it's consular processing, obviously most people are not necessarily represented by attorneys when they go to the consular processing, but in the United States, when you go to an interview, you can bring your attorney along. So there are just a few distinctions that come to mind when I think of how it works.
Mm-hmm. Anything you'd like to add to me?
I would say you said in our community. So I think the most common, and I have quite a few Dominicans, the process that is quicker is going to be a spousal petition. I see that more commonly with people who enter on a visitor's visa or students on an F1 visa. And the difference between the F1 and a visitor's visa is basically the students are in status for duration of status. So they can actually marry a green card holder and still be able to adjust their status if they do not fall out of status before their priority date is current. Now, by fall out of status, that means you either stop going to school or you do something like you work without authorization or something that causes a break in your status. However, if you're married to a citizen, if you work without permission, if you fall out of status, all of that will be forgiven, but it's only forgiven after your petition is approved. A lot of people have this misconception that because they're married to a citizen, they cannot be detained, they cannot be deported because they're married to a citizen. And that is actually not true at all. Just the marriage doesn't mean anything. It's just a piece of paper until you have something behind that piece of paper. And you need an approval for that piece of paper to actually be helpful for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm really happy we're having this conversation, and I see we have quite an audience that have already joined us. So guys, don't forget, I'm going to be trying to take as many of your questions as possible. So I see the Facebook Live already has quite a number of comments. So keep the comments and the questions coming, because I know we have a lot of questions that we're trying to ask. And Alex, I'm going to give you a few more minutes, and then I will probably engage you at about 7:30, 8:30 Dominica time. So I'm going to come to you in a little bit, Alex, but I will come to you shortly, because I think what we're seeing is that there's so much information out there. People are becoming overwhelmed. People are becoming anxious because they're not sure exactly what is true. And for our listening and our viewing audience, just keep in mind that at the end of the program, I'm going to provide you with the contact numbers for both Tamika and Portia, so that if you have additional questions, you can reach out to them. Now, people, please, these are attorneys at law. If you were to engage any attorney at law, yes, you have to pay their fees. So please, when we provide you with the contact information, don't blow up their emails, don't blow up their phone numbers if they call looking for free information, right? Because guess what? They had to pay for their degrees. And the same way, if we went to an attorney who was not Dominican, we would be expecting to pay them. Please respect the profession and be willing to pay for the services. Because I think all of us can now see what happens when you don't pay for the service and then you end up in a situation that is difficult to come out of. And I see Tamika nodding, so I know that these are the cases. So I think one of the questions that is probably on many people's mind is surrounding overstaying on a visitor's visa and now being out of status. So before we even talk about if you overstayed on a visa, how can you get back into status? Let us talk about the implications of overstaying on a visa, because I think what happens is that the laws were always in effect, right? They were always there, but now there is a greater push to enforce those laws. So tell us what happens to someone who overstays on their visitor's visa. Should they be concerned that they're going to be deported at this point? So your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's always a risk of deportation when you've violated the terms and conditions of your visa. There's always a risk. However, we have to take into consideration that once someone is detained by ICE, doesn't necessarily mean they're put on a plane and sent back home immediately. There are laws and people do have rights. If you usually you're given a notice of appearance to appear in immigration court, and if there are forms of relief you can avail yourself with, then you have the opportunity to apply for those forms of relief. So, for example, if someone overstayed a visa, they've been living in the United States for 12 years. They have 2 or 3 children that were born in the United States. They may have an option called cancellation of removal, for example, and they can, at the end, obtain a green card if they're able to persuade an immigration judge that, you know, they meet the criteria and it's warranted in their case. So that's an option. So sometimes at the end of the day, it may end up being a blessing in disguise. If you're put in immigration proceedings, you end up with a green card. So I think in terms of risk, there's always a risk with people who've overstayed their visa. But as attorney Ms. Jude said, the ones that she typically sees, people who get married, you know, they come to the United States on a F1 visa, they meet the love of their life, they meet someone, they get married. That's typically the most common and most expeditious way to become legitimate in the United States.
Any thoughts on that, Tamika?
Yes, what I will add is you did speak about the risk of overstaying. A lot of people fall victim, especially those in certain states like New York, California, fall victim to what we call in the immigration world as notarial fraud. So that is where people will advertise a work permit. They will say you can get a work permit, you can get a travel document. They will take your money, often over $10,000, which people find to pay these people, but they can't find it to pay an attorney. I don't know. I don't understand that. So they get this magical work permit and this magical travel document, and they don't know what the person did. They're just happy they get a work permit, only to find out sometimes that person filed a fraudulent VAWA application stating that their spouse was abusing them or their child was abusing them, or a fraudulent asylum claim. You have a work permit and you're the happiest person on earth because you have a work permit. Everybody talking to you about overstaying and you're like, but I have a work permit. If my case wasn't good, they won't give me a work permit. I personally know somebody who I said to, hello, this case is fraudulent. You need to withdraw this case because you are going to find yourself in removal proceedings. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Wow. I have my work permit. I travel on my travel parole. How many times? What you mean? You're telling me you're just a hater? You're just hating on me? I said, okay, cool. Literally last week, I got a call from the sister, very frantic, that person was picked up because it finally caught up to them. USCIS adjudicated that VAWA petition and found out that the birth certificate for the U.S. citizen child they submitted was fake. Found out that there was no abuse. And this person is now in detention and is now coming back to me. And it's like, you went to pay somebody 15,000. Now you're telling me you don't have money to pay me to get you. So that happens a lot of times. The fast, and if it sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. If an attorney is telling you no and they're giving you legitimate reasons why it's a no, I would err on the side of caution rather than thinking, oh, this person don't know what they're talking about. Because I would think that an attorney, before they tell somebody no, would do their research. Now, we're not always right. But if I'm explaining to you that, hey, this is fraud, if you get caught, and now once you get hit with immigration fraud, it's so much harder. Even if you get married to Donald Trump, you're not going to get that green card. Especially if it's a fraudulent asylum claim. Fraudulent asylum claim is a permanent bar to all and every single form of immigration relief. And that is not a bar that there's a waiver for. That is not something that you can wave a magic wand. That is not something that's even waivable by the U visa waivers, which is like the strongest waiver. That's the strongest waiver because it waives a permanent bar. So people need to be very careful with who they speak to after overstaying a visa, who they give their money to. If that person does not have a law degree, be careful. Even if that person does have a law degree and what they're saying doesn't make sense to you, if you have a consultation, an attorney should always be able to tell you the source of their information. So if I tell you that, hey, based on this, you're inadmissible, I'm supposed to be able to tell you the exact section of law that makes you inadmissible. Even if I don't know the exact section, I would say, well, because you have a conviction for marijuana, it was more than X amount, then you're inadmissible. There's no waiver. I'm supposed to be able to show you that. If an attorney or somebody else cannot show you clearly how you're eligible for certain relief, chances are you're not. Now, if you have questions about what that person just told you, a second opinion is always an option, but don't go back to the same person who told you the doubtable information in the first place for a second opinion, because you're going to tell them, well, I saw that on the internet, and they're going to give you an explanation. So I'm just saying a lot of people fall victim to notarial fraud. They go and they say they're going to marry somebody to get their papers, and then that person starts blackmailing them. That person starts extorting them, and then that they come to you now to file for VAWA, but I cannot file a VAWA because the marriage was not bona fide to begin with. So again, I know it's difficult after you've overstayed and you feel like you can't work, you can't do this, you can't do that, but it's definitely not worth it to take the quick and easy way out or the fraudulent way out. Because I personally know of someone who has been waiting for a green card for 18 years now, based on a fraudulent petition that, I think that person has angels watching them, because I don't understand how this petition is still pending after all these years. And then you have that difficult conversation that, hey, this needs to be withdrawn. And once it's withdrawn, then you've been here long enough that you can actually apply for cancellation of removal. You're 50, 60, 70 years old. You've been here your whole life. You're going to be able to get that relief. But again, that's a risk that most people aren't willing to take. They usually
because then the fear is you're going to get deported if you make the assertion that you've overstayed for that long.
Pretty much, yes.
So let me,
I was going to just add something quickly about asylum. Asylum also is one of those areas where a lot of lawyers have gotten themselves in trouble for placing their clients in asylum proceedings, so they can withdraw the asylum application and file a cancellation of removal application for them. Asylum is a very high bar. It's very difficult, and most people are filing frivolous asylum claims, which they know in the end will get denied and they'll be back at square one. So asylum is the one that's really subject to a lot of fraud, because everybody thinks if there's a crime in my neighborhood or if I've been a victim of domestic violence, that they automatically asylum is an option, but it's really not. Asylum is very, very difficult to get, and very limited amount of cases get approved for asylum.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And also what I wanted to address, again, just kind of dissecting all the information that is out there. Is there a distinction between if you've overstayed on your visa and you try to get what we like to call papers through someone else who has a green card, as opposed to someone who has a citizenship? Because from what I'm hearing, your best option is to get your papers through someone who has a citizenship, and it may not even be possible if the person has a green card, if you've overstayed your visa. Can you guys educate us on that?
Okay, so I guess I opened that can of worms, so I need to close it, right? Yes, there is a distinction. If someone has overstayed a visa, they are now in a period of unauthorized stay. For you to adjust your status, if you're married to a green card holder, you have to be within a period of authorized stay. So that means you cannot. And what often happens is we have to file the I-130 and then tell them we're going to wait until the spouse is eligible for naturalization. I know some attorneys will wait until after naturalization to file the I-130, but typically a lot of people just file that I-130. But right now in the current immigration landscape, I'm not sure if people are gonna still be willing to file those I-130s because we have to put addresses on there. But generally, once that person becomes a citizen, then you're immediately able to adjust. Now, there is a major distinction about even with citizens that a lot of people don't know about. There's something called the Adam Walsh Act. 90%, and I guess attorney Charles Collaz can correct me if my number is inflated, but I think about 90% of those cases get denied. Correct, right? About 90%.
Yes.
Probably closer to 99, if I'm honest. And that is a situation where you are married to a US citizen, or maybe that US citizen is your child, and maybe that's your parent. That person has a conviction for specified crimes against a minor, kidnapping, child abuse, sexual abuse, those type of things. If that person has those types of convictions, those type of felonies, they are barred from filing a petition for you unless they can get what is called an Adam Walsh waiver. Unfortunately, those type of convictions are not something that people often disclose. So a lot of people get married to individuals only to see that there's a biometrics notice for the petitioner, which never really happens unless there's something in that person's criminal background. And find out that they're married to this person and they cannot get papers from that person, even if that person is a citizen. I have seen people who filed an Adam Walsh petition at least 5 times. I've seen notice of intent to deny. I always tell them, hey, I can respond to this, but I'm telling you 90% or probably 99% will get denied. So we can respond to this with as much evidence as we want. But I've actually seen a denial notice that clearly said, we ask you for XYZ. You give us XYZ, but we're still not convinced that your husband is not a risk to you. So, or your son is not a risk to you. So that is a distinction, that just because somebody is a citizen does not mean they are capable of petitioning for people. And these people often have to find other ways around it. And for some people, they don't have another way around it. If there's abuse, of course, we tell them you can file VAWA. If you have a child, we say wait until the child gets to that age. But that is something that is not just a guarantee that because somebody's a citizen. However, if you have a citizen spouse who does not have any of those crazy things in their background, it's going to be a lot quicker for you to get your green card than if you overstayed. You can definitely get the unlawful presence waived.
So I can.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
Portia.
go ahead.
You can go
No,
ahead.
I was just saying I could add to that because
Yes.
I'm also a criminal lawyer as well. One of the areas people don't talk often about is post-conviction relief.
Correct.
So if someone has a felony conviction, let's say for some type of sexual crime, maybe they took a plea when they didn't know what the immigration consequences were. There's some post-conviction motions that they can file to vacate that conviction. And once the conviction has been removed, then it increases your possibilities in terms of what you're eligible to file or not. So a lot of times like Attorney Chu said, people will have certain like indecent assault or crimes of a sexual nature in their past that they generally don't disclose when they're having a candid conversation with attorneys. But however, if you disclose that to the attorney, there very well may be a way they can vacate your conviction if the facts and circumstances warranted. So those are avenues people can also explore. A lot of the attorneys don't like taking those difficult questions where immigration and crime intersect, but there's a lot of relief that can be pursued to remove convictions.
And
Yeah, and I'm really, yes, go ahead, Tamika.
Yeah, it's also important to note that at least in Florida, right now, because of the uptake of like people saying they did not know the immigration consequences, they have actually changed the language that they say after someone takes a plea. So there's been situations where people say, well, I didn't know this and that and that. And then you review the transcript and you see the judge tell them, do you understand that because you're not a US citizen, you may be removed from the US, blah, blah, blah. And they tell the judge, yes, I understand. And years down the line, they come to you and say, I did not understand. However, if probably English was not that person's first language, or the attorney who was representing them did not properly advise them, there are ways around things if you were not properly advised by your attorneys. But it's very important to let the immigration attorney know. Not everybody does crimmigration. Crimmigration is sort of a niche, I would say, because I get a lot of consults from attorneys basically asking me, hey, Tika, look at this statute. What do you think? X, Y, Z. But it's important if you have a criminal history to find out from your attorney, hey, do you have experience with dealing with people with criminal convictions? If not, do you have a referral for me? Because we as attorneys, we help each other out. So even if I may not be competent in it, I may have a colleague who is competent that I could call up, send a conviction record, and they can look at it quickly and tell me yes or no. But we cannot do that if you don't tell us. And if you try to keep it a secret and try to keep it hush-hush, you're going to find yourself in a situation where a lot of times attorneys will drop you if you lie to them. And I have had people in removal lie to me, and I had to tell the judge, Your Honor, I am not willing to proceed with this case, especially when it's such a lie that would make me look bad on the record, like I was, doing the fraudulent petition for them. So that's very important.
And I want to bring Alex. Alex, I'm not sure. Portia, I'm going to come right back to you. Alex, I'm not sure if you can hear us. Hopefully, you can. So again, Alex is going to be off camera for just a little bit longer. But Alex, I'm happy we're having this conversation, because the reason we're having this conversation is because of this very aggressive stance that is being placed on immigration, where there's this with great aggression, the desire to deport people who are illegal in this country. And we saw within the first day of the Trump administration that there were 100 executive orders, and many of these have implication for our immigrant communities. So what are your thoughts, Alex, in terms of what is going on with the Trump administration? And then I also want us to look, when you come back on, I also want us to look at the Constitution as a form of protection, because we're seeing a very aggressive administration in the White House right now, and it seems that they want unlimited control in terms of what they're able to do. But I want you to explain in the next segment how the Constitution is going to safeguard, is going to serve as a safeguard, a gate to ensure that the president cannot just willy-nilly deal his authority. But what are your thoughts on all these executive orders, a lot of them that are impacting our communities, our Black and brown communities? Your thoughts on that?
Well, shock and awe. I think the president, I don't refer to him by name, I call him by number 47, is dealing with the presidency in a manner in which it cannot be sustained. And if you want to judge the efficacy of a president, is to see how many executive orders they use to get things done. So very weak, and presidents use several executive orders, which are pretty much going to be short-lived, and will be challenged, and has been challenged, and will continue to be challenged, to the point where I think the administration will be frustrated with the legal challenges. So that's my overall view of the multiple executive orders. And I think what is really driving those orders is mainly the rhetoric behind the politics, not even policy per se. Yes, policy, yes, but guys as rhetoric, which is just not the way to effectively administer to the United States of America. So that's one. Immigration, and I'm listening to the lawyers here, and boy, they make so much sense.
They are on top of it.
They
Thank
make
you, ladies.
so much sense, but I wanted to add a little perspective to this issue called immigration, which is now heavily legal or law-based. But immigration as a concept is not just planted in law. We have psychology, also then sociology, because people migrated long before law mandated how people migrated. Even the very people who established the laws which manage immigration migrated outside of the law. So migration has been happening over time, many, many years, eons of years, without legal prerequisites, so to speak. Immigration really followed convenience, circumstances, caused people to move from one place to another. And yes, since the definition of states, the Peace of Westphalia, the sovereignty of countries, we have laws, immigration laws. That's why we have immigration attorneys on the program tonight telling us about our rights when it comes to how we migrate and if we overstay, what we do, how we seek recourse. But I wanted the lawyers to help me to broaden this idea of immigration, because when one family member gets picked up by ICE and gets deported, that's a psychological impact on the family, on the community, both in the US and back in the Caribbean, wherever the person is being deported to. So that aspect of immigration, I would like us to talk about a little bit, because that's my area of expertise, is what happened to the people, to the subjects, how the law speaks to the cases, because these are living, breathing people who are affected by the practices based on the law. So that's what I would like to add to the program tonight, Simone, if you do not mind, to broaden the perspective, so to speak.
Yes,
I can add something to that.
Absolutely, Alex, you're absolutely correct. Yes, go ahead, Portia.
I remember a couple of years ago, I was working on a convention of torture case, and in doing so, I was doing some research about some articles in different countries. The person was from Cape Verde. And it appears that the story is really grim, that a lot of people will commit suicide like within weeks of being deported to their home country, especially if they left as a child, and sometimes they're no longer fluent in the language, and they go back home and they jump over a bridge or they kill themselves. So it's very grim. A lot of them generally don't go on to do great things. Sometimes they resort to a life of crime. It just goes downhill from there. I had one other one where the person essentially was killed after being deported back to Mexico, not speaking Spanish and being able to navigate their circumstances, and they lost their life. So the stories are not very grim in that regard, in my experience.
Yeah, and I'm happy that you can share that perspective, because one of the issues that I personally have in terms of how the deportation is being done, I think it's a lot of grandstanding, show personship, so to speak. And at the end of the day, I think that's going to dissipate eventually, naturally. But I think it's about, okay, here am I, new sheriff in town, here's what I'm going to do. One of the things probably that could be adopted, Leonard sisters, is probably some kind of an amnesty program where the people who are illegal would be asked to find ways of addressing the situation, give them at least 6 to 8 months, a year. Say, look, I'm here, that's my policy, amnesty time, do what you have to do, get on the books. If not, I'm going to deport you. But the kind of a wholesale, rapid, aggressive deportation of individuals is causing a hemorrhaging, not just in America, but around the world. And here in Florida in particular, I know a lot of families students come to me in tears asking me what it is that they should do. I'm still like that as an attorney. Right. So in case the American warning.
Alex, you're breaking up a little bit.
Okay, well,
yeah, let me try again.
Yeah.
You were
Yeah.
talking about students crying to you.
I guess I can add to it.
Yeah,
And
I
then
think we'll come back. Alex, we'll come back to you. We'll come back to you, Alex. Go ahead, Tamika.
okay, this particular topic is very dear to me. This is actually what my PhD thesis is on. My dissertation actually. I am focusing on the socioeconomic impact of deportation of lawful permanent residents.
1 second, Tamika. Alex, mute your mic a second for me, please. Thank you.
Oh, yes. So I am focusing my dissertation on the socioeconomic impact on the families when they deport lawful permanent residents for nonviolent crimes. Because I know Mrs. Charles Collaz will tell you that they do deport, like, for example, let's say somebody gives you a bad check, right? You know it's a bad check, but you broke. So you go to the bank, you cash that check. You could get deported as an aggravated felon for that. And that means you're not coming back. For the most part, you're not coming back. So I have been looking at, like, is it fair that these people who are lawful permanent residents don't get to just do their jail time and get out for something simple? Like, they're very simple offenses that you would think are minor. That, for example, somebody can get. I had a situation where I had a client who he had a girlfriend, and they had some sort of dispute at the baby shower, and somebody called the police. They arrested him, locked him up for DV. They gave him an injunction, told him stay away from the girl. You know what happened? After he got out of jail, the girl went because she wanted to have relations with him, sexual relations with him. She went to his house. He was yelling at her to get out because he didn't want to get in trouble. Again, the neighbors heard them fighting, called the police. Now he's in deportation proceedings for violating that order of protection. They did not care that she came to his house. They didn't care that it was not a situation where he willingly violated it. She came to his house. But because he violated that order and the judge ruled that he had violated that order of protection, that meant that this guy who's been a lawful permanent resident, who's been in the US since he was 3 years old, is now 25 years old and fighting deportation.
Wow.
Of course, we're going to do a non-LPR cancellation, but that just goes to show you that even somebody with a green card, and now if that person, when he was detained, the girlfriend, the same one who got him in trouble in the first place, is the one who was calling saying the kids are crying for their father, is the one who's saying that he was the sole breadwinner. And just him being detained, he's not deported, but with him being detained, the family was suffering. She ended up losing custody of the children because she could not afford to take care of the kids. And that's a family that was just torn apart. Now, not saying I condone domestic violence, but by the own words of the girl, it was a misunderstanding. It was somebody, a bystander, who got involved. Even after she told the court that, hey, no, he did not. This is not what happened. He was actually charged because they said he touched her against her will. So that's what the battery was. Wow. Touching her against her will. Not even a situation where he beat her. It's not a situation where she was hurt. Like, this police report just said that she was trying to leave and he held on to her hand. And imagine somebody can get deported for that. And now our children are without a father. The girl, and I mean, I got him out of detention. I got him bond. But I spoke with him recently, and apparently the girl is pregnant again, the same girl.
That's a mess. Let me have thank you, Tamika. Let me have Portia chime in.
Yeah, certainly. So with a lot of these criminal cases, one of the greatest logistical challenge that you have is when your client get detained by ICE. It's very difficult to liaise with ICE to get them to bring your client to state court. So if he's being charged with violation of a prevention order, I mean, there are many avenues you can take. You can go to trial. You can speak to the district attorney and try to negotiate some type of resolution that doesn't end in a conviction. But many times ICE will not even allow your client to exercise their right to a trial. So that's one of the challenges you have, even when you're accused of a crime and you probably have a very strong defense. you may not be able to execute that defense because ICE won't take you to state court. So essentially, you're being detained on a domestic violence case, but you never got the opportunity to go to court and demonstrate that maybe the reporter is not credible, maybe there are other witnesses, maybe you have an alibi and you weren't where they said you were, but you're not able to explore those things at I dropped my headphone, but you're not able to explore those options because ICE won't take you to state court. So I can definitely see the challenges with that.
Yeah, and let me stay with let me
point.
hold that thought 1 second, Tamika. Let me stay with you, Portia, for a minute, because I think the other thing we have to look at is the implications for children who were born here. And I want to talk to Alex in a little bit about the 14th Amendment. But what the implications for children who are born in this country, who are citizens, but their parents are not documented in this country? What are the implications? I mean, if their parents are deported, do they simply have to go back with their parents? Because that is the kind of information that our audience needs to be educated on so that they can know their options. Because I'm sure just about everyone listening to this program knows of someone, whether it's a relative, a friend, a neighbor, somebody who has overstayed their papers, their visa, and is now illegal in this country and maybe potentially have children. So Portia first, and then Tamika will come to you as well. But what are the options for children who are citizens of the U.S. who have parents who are illegal in this country?
Well, the first thing you have to keep in mind is that an executive order doesn't necessarily mean it's the law.
Right.
There's already been multiple lawsuits filed by ACLU, by attorney generals of certain states. The last time I checked, there's been 3 U.S. District Court judges who've issued preliminary injunctions on the executive order. And I suspect there'll be more challenges across the United States with regards to birthright citizenship. I mean, most judges pretty much thought it was a ridiculous notion that children born in the United States cannot be U.S. citizen when it's inherent in the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So I don't suspect that even if it goes to the Supreme Court, I don't suspect that that would be a winning argument for the Trump administration, though.
Yeah, definitely. Tamika.
Yes. So basically, she covered that part. But in terms of your question about whether the children have to go, that is a decision that the parents make. That is not necessarily a decision that I know during the campaign, President, well, I don't like calling him president, but that man said that in order to keep families together, because one of the goals of the U.S. immigration system, and that is a sentence that I use in every single waiver application, every single hardship petition that I do, I always put the sentence that one of the goals, the main goals of the U.S. immigration system is reunification of families, keeping families together. And he's saying that he's going to keep them together by deporting the children with the parents. Unfortunately, legally, they cannot deport a U.S. citizen child just because their alien parent is being deported. There is no precedent for it in law. There is no, there's nothing in the INA, which is the Immigration Nationality Act, that would give them permission to deport a U.S. citizen. As a matter of fact, when they have deported U.S. citizens, they've had to bring them back and they've been sued. I actually have a case where I have a U.S. citizen client who is Dominican, who didn't know he was a citizen. And I got him out of detention on the fact that he is a U.S. citizen, but they kept him in there for 41 days before releasing him, even after I let them know. So right now, that is a lawsuit that is going to happen. Similar lawsuits, people have recovered $100,000 per day of the false imprisonment. So I told you mine was there for 41 days. So that's something we're definitely, I just wanted everything the dust to settle with that case before we actually went through with, the lawsuit and everything. But just saying that it's not something that they can willy-nilly do. So even if I'm being deported, my son, who's a U.S. citizen, cannot be forced. And also the deportation flights, especially when you're detained, they don't, because of safety issues, nobody even really knows when it is. Your attorney might have an idea based on whatever, but they don't really give us information. A lot of times I find out is from contacting people in Dominica to find out, have you gotten the list? Do you know the date? Sometimes it's the day of. The client will call me and tell me, hey, I'm going down today. So there's no possible way for them to put the child on the plane of the parent, and children are not kept in adult detention centers. So that is not a legitimate fear that people should be having in terms of their kids and what will happen if they are detained.
I have one very important thing to add to that. You mentioned children, and it just triggered something. So, one of the things people can do to protect themselves too is to have a plan. In the event that you get detained, you should have a plan in the works to make sure your children are secure. For instance, someone that can have the authority to pick them up from school, take them to the doctor, make decisions about their healthcare, their education, things of that sort. You can try to do some type of temporary guardianships in family court to make sure that in the event you get picked up, that there's a U.S. citizen, someone who's situated that can take care of your children until you figure out what you're going to do next. Because the worst possible thing that can happen to a parent is to get picked up and your children are still in school and you don't know what's going to happen to them. They could be transferred to foster care. They could be in the middle of nowhere and you never reconnect with them again. So that's one of the fear most parents have is, if I get picked up, what's going to happen to my children? So I would suggest that they come up with a plan and figure out a person they trust that they can make a temporary guardian to their children, so that person can spring into action in the event they're detained.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex, let me come to you, and we're going to get ready to engage with our callers and take the comments on Facebook in just a little while. So guys, keep the comments coming on Facebook. I see that they're coming. And I also went ahead and posted a link to a video that says what to do if ICE knocks on your door. And then I want to come back and engage with our two attorneys on exactly that question: what to do if ICE knocks on your door. But Alex, it just feels like we are just in a state of free fall. It feels like we are at the mercy of a very aggressive administration. And I'm happy that everyone here is committed to not calling the name of the person who's causing us all this anxiety. But let us talk a little bit, Alex, about the Constitution, because I recently saw a program that you did with Lofty, and you talked about how the Prime Minister in the islands actually have more power than the U.S. president, because there's so many safeguards, there's so many gatekeepers that keep the government in stability, so we don't actually have to experience a complete free fall at the mercy of a very aggressive president. So Alex, give us a little bit of hope that this will be somehow mitigated with the Constitution and the gatekeepers.
Yeah, I think the present aggression of the administration of the United States of America is going to be short-lived. There's no way that aggression can be sustained for too long. I say between 12 to 18 months, the administration should simmer down and probably catch a hold of its senses, if the administration is a thing, which it is a thing. The administration of America is being run by an extremist movement, MAGA, which is beyond right. And a lot of what they do is based on rhetoric. This thing about deporting the entire family to keep the family together is a nonsense argument, because the lawyers got it right. You really cannot deport a U.S. citizen. You may be able to deport someone who's a resident, but not a citizen. And there may be a wish that people who were born here of illegal parents or undocumented parents should not be citizens. That's just a wish. The 14th Amendment takes care of that. And for that to change, there has to be a constitutional amendment to that amendment. And it's going to take a lot to have a constitutional amendment done by Congress right now as we speak. The president does not have standing, does not have the power based on the separation of powers, the three different branches of government, to do what he is suggesting that he has done or will do. It is just not possible. It is pretty much creating anxiety for no good reason, just to destabilize the people and to put fear, to poke fear. So there's no way, shape, or form that an American president can have authority over any constitutional mandate. And the birthright citizenship is one of those mandates that is guaranteed by the Constitution. And yes, I would have said earlier on some program with Lofty that a sitting prime minister of a democracy or democratic country in the Caribbean has more administrative powers than the president of America has over the government of the respective countries. Because a prime minister has the authority under our constitution to select and elect members of his cabinet or her cabinet. The president ought not do so on their behalf. They can nominate or suggest who they would like. Congress has to approve those individuals. So there is very limited powers the presidents have. In fact, the framers were very wary to give so much powers to a president because they did not want the idea of another monarch to emerge from a chief executive. And a lot of the executive orders that's been done now is called power grab by the U.S. chief executive, where they can define how laws should be implemented based on laws that were already made. So presidents don't make laws. They define how the laws should be applied. And most times their definition is flawed in law. That's why the courts, I think Portia said so, the courts come back and check the president. If you observe, he's speaking a lot now about the courts mandating, they're not ruling. Yes, the courts can mandate you to go back on your words and to change a definition that you give to a law, because a president is not a lawyer. Most of them are not. The people who sit on the bench are they're at least experts on the Constitution. So they are the ones who safeguard the integrity of the American government. And the good thing about the American government, like it or not, there are systems in place to check the ambition of people who try to overuse the power that the Constitution gives them. And no one member of the American government has any amount of power that causes him or her to unilaterally rule on cases like that. So somebody should inform our president that he does not have the power, he does not have standing, the Constitution does not give him the teeth that he thinks he has. And eventually, I think within the year or so, all of that's going to simmer down. And he's already even in lame duck territory. He started as a lame duck, and it's going to get worse as time goes by. I think that's why he's being so aggressive with what he's trying to do. That, in a nutshell, is how I can answer that question. I'm Simo.
Yes, thank you for that. Let me have Portia and Tamika jump in real quick before we take the calls. Any thoughts you have right now? And then when we come back from the calls, I want us to talk about if ICE knocks on your door, or in any way they detain you, what you should and shouldn't do. We're even hearing cases of people being detained at the airport if they have a green card. So I'm just going to open up the discussion when we come back. And just to have you, you might have tips to share with us that I may not have the question to ask. So you're the expert. We're just going to open up the floor. But before we go to the calls, any thoughts you want to share right now? Not on what we're going to talk about after the break, but just anything that is pressing right now.
Just one thing I'd like to bring up. A lot of times you'll see in the press conferences that the administration calls people who've overstayed their visa or people who are illegal or undocumented in the country are criminals. Yep. I just want to make a distinction. If you've overstayed your visa, it's a civil violation. You're not a criminal. So I want to make that very clear. When you overstay your visa, you're not a criminal. It's a civil violation. It becomes a crime if you're deported and you re-enter. that's when it becomes a crime and you're subject to potential jail time. So when I hear the word criminalians, criminal, it's actually offensive. Someone who overstayed their visa is not a criminal. So I just want to put that out there.
But it also speaks to the mentality. It also speaks to the attitude of the immigrant. And if you are not a Native American, if you're not of Native American descent, we're all immigrants. Because at some point we all, like Antigans would say, we all bang water if we come here. Tamika.
Yes, what I want to add to that is, again, that is something that irks my soul. People assume that coming by the border, through the border, means you came illegally. There's a border between America and Canada. You can legally cross the border. There are people who cross the border in Mexico who were paroled into this country. So this type of stigma towards people, oh, you cross the border, but I take plane, like, come on. It doesn't make sense. And it's very annoying to me to have to explain this to people over and over again, that just because somebody came through the border does not mean they're illegal. And what do you mean illegal? It's not illegal to remain in the US without permission. So what's the legality about it?
Right.
That is really, really important that you're making that point, because simply to cross does not make it illegal. The illegality comes with, let's say, when you are processed, the parole hearing and whatever, and you don't acquiesce to whatever order was done, because people may cross the border because they're seeking asylum. There must be an asylum hearing to hear what it is. So it does not become illegal until there is a court action, there is an order by a judge. And if you break that order, then you become illegal.
But even then, you're still not technically illegal, because there are people living in the US with an order of removal. They're just in periods of unauthorized stay with an unexecuted removal order. I guess the illegality comes when they order you removed, you leave, and then you come back to the border.
Come back in here.
Is what is a felony. That is actually a felony.
Because you have the due diligence right anyway while your matter is being processed to be here in the US or wherever it is that you're actually having the matter, wherever you are at the time when the matter is being processed. So you're quite right on that. There is nothing illegal about doing it. Is what you do after the process, the re-entry and stuff like that. That makes it a problem.
That's correct.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in very quickly. And my God, we have to take the calls, but we could go on forever. We might have to have a part two to this conversation, because what is the agenda? Why so much anti-immigrant agenda? And then you look at the images of the people who are deported, and you realize that they're all Black and brown people. So what we're trying to say, that there are no Europeans who are illegal in this country that should be rounded up as well. So Alex, why the anti-immigrant agenda? Why the over aggressiveness towards Black and brown immigrants?
Let me tell you that. Very simple. There is data. There is data which suggests that in about 20 or 30 years' time, the demographic of America is going to be very dark, much darker than it is right now. And MAGA represents a sort of protection of the mainstream American culture, which people say is white. So MAGA has a lot to do with, and if you listen to the Proud Boys and the people who follow the MAGA movement, they're all about preserving their quota of flavor when it comes to the color in America. You would have heard our president said recently that he's going to create asylum for immigrants who are white. That thing about equity and diversity, this is now taboo language to be used in the classroom here and in general palace in America. So the short answer to that is there is a general notion that people who are white are being overridden by people who are Black. So the rhetoric, the importation America who are Black, we get rid of a lot of them who are Black, and we try to open the avenue for people who are white to emigrate into America. That is the qualified short answer to it. And I think I heard one of our panelists said racism has never ceased. I mean, we have had different forms. It has transformed in different ways. But I never understood racism until I moved to America to see it in real and live in color. It's a real thing in America.
Yeah,
Covered
so
to use
guys, hold the thoughts, because we could go on forever. Write down any thoughts that you want to share, but we must go and engage our callers and our Facebook audience at this time. But keep writing some notes. When we come back, we're just going to open up the floor and just have you share anything you would like to share before we even get close to the 9 o'clock hour. Lambi, over to you.
Roots Connection Q, taking your calls right now. The numbers are as follow: 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257. Those are local numbers. The overseas number is 305-432-9624. Let me run those numbers again one more time. 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, and 305-432-9624. Back to you, Simon.
Yes, thank you, Lambi. So we have Claudia. We have a call.
Yes, we do. Caller, please go ahead.
Good night, Lambi. Good night, Simon and your crew.
Good night. Good evening.
I want to say good night to Portia. Portia Charles, I guess. Raised up in Amba. I'm from Pamela from Goodwill Church, and I'm so happy to hear you, my dear. You and my daughter Robertska and Rebecca grew up together. So I want to say I'm proud of you, Portia.
Appreciate it.
Give my regard to your mother and your father for me, please.
Certainly, I will.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for calling. Claudia says, good evening. Good evening, Tika G. Jude. Kyle Kofi, always nice to see you on the program. Greetings and many blessings. Julie Polidor, nice to have you on board. Ron Stoppable, nice to see you. We have a call coming in.
Yes, we have a caller. Caller, please go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, please, caller. Good evening. There's a delay. Just go ahead and say what you want to say.
Yeah, my question is, with the current immigration crackdown, how does that affect persons who have applied for green cards?
Good question. Ladies, how does that affect people who have applied for green cards? Thank you for the question. Yes, go ahead, guys. Someone can answer.
Oh, certainly. So if someone has already filed for documentation, as we had spoken about earlier, they're still at risk for deportation. As the other guest said, that just because you have a piece of paper that you're married and you filed for something, but you haven't gotten an approval yet, you're still at risk of being picked up by ICE. The only good news is once you're in deportation proceedings, you will have options for relief. One of them would be adjustment of status, or if there's another avenue that you have, maybe you have a child that's 21 years old and a U.S. citizen that could petition for you, you can avail yourself of those rights once in deportation proceeding. And usually if you're detained and you don't have a criminal history, you also have a chance of getting bonded out as well. Obviously, you have to have a great lawyer like Attorney Jude or myself to persuade the court that there's equities about you and that you're not a danger to the public, and that if released, that you will come back to court and you'll get released and pursue whatever options you have while you're on the outside.
I think one thing I want to add to that is we have seen a trend where judges have actually approved bond and ICE is refusing to release people, even against the judge's order, or they would release the person and then catch them right back and put them back into. That has been happening. I think for the last 2 weeks, I've heard at least 4 attorneys say that that's happened to their clients. So do not take for granted that because we just told you may qualify for bond, that you are going to get bond. So still have a contingency plan, ensure that you have things in order, ensure that somebody has access to your bank accounts, because I will tell you that everybody is your family until you're in immigration jail and you need to pay for a lawyer. I have seen situations where people have been helping family for years, and when they get into the deportation, those same family members don't even want to pay $1,000 towards their removal proceedings. So if you have money saved up, make sure somebody trusted knows, how to access. Maybe you don't want to give them all your details, but at least something in a safe or somewhere safe that if something does happen, somebody can access your documents to be able to help you out. And it has to be someone you trust, not the man you
Absolutely.
met down the road last week or the person you slept with last night. It has to be somebody that you trust. It doesn't even have to be someone in the States. It can be your mother who probably still lives in Dominica. You give her that information so that if she gets the call that you're detained, she can give the banking account number, the routing number, so that your legal fees can get paid. Because I can tell you that the most common reason why people get deported is they may have a case where they could remain, but they cannot afford legal representation, and they're too proud to try to get pro bono representation. Or sometimes pro bono does not have the capacity to represent them. So with your contingencies, instead of buying the Gucci, Prada, Louis Vuitton, if you know you don't have a lawful status, save your money, because that money may need to save you later down the line.
Absolutely. So let's
I
take some
agree.
more
I
comments.
concur.
Yeah, let's take some more comments. Louisa, all the way out there in the UK. Hi, Louisa, my friend. Nice to see you. What position are students in with regards to the immigration crackdown? There must be so many non-citizens who must be very scared right now. So students should be fine as long as they have the required visa. Are they at risk of being deported? Portia?
Well, based on my knowledge, I don't believe they are. Because
Right.
as an F1 student, as long as you comply with the requirements of your F1 status, you remain in school, full-time schedule, you're doing what you're supposed to do, and you're in status, I don't see no reason why ICE can pick you up and deport you.
Right. Excellent. Hazel,
Unless you've been accused of a crime, it's possible.
right.
Or if you lose your F1 status, for example, I know somebody who they were with somebody in school with them too at Midwestern, and the young lady heard about a U visa. So she went and said that the guy beat her up and his visa was revoked while he was in the States and could not be reinstated because of that accusation, because he was arrested. And that brings me to a very important point. When you're arrested, please do not plead no contest, and please don't go pleading guilty without speaking to an immigration attorney. Your public defender is not your friend. They have quotas, and those quotas are to solve the case by all means necessary. And they don't understand immigration, so they will tell you, oh, you didn't plead guilty, you pled no contest. But a plea of no contest is a conviction for immigration purposes. So please be very careful with what you agree to, what you sign. And yes, it can get scary when they tell you maybe facing a year in prison, but speak to an immigration attorney. So maybe we can help your attorney decide on a lesser offense that you can actually plead to, or maybe something that would not result in a conviction. But it's very important that even if you have a green card, you have to be very careful with what pleas you take if you are arrested. And as an F1 student, you have to be even more careful because your service gets canceled very quickly. And a lot of times you don't even know if it's canceled.
Yes.
I have
Portia.
something important to add
Yes,
to that
Portia.
conversation.
Yes.
And another thing to take into consideration too is that every state is different. For example, I can tell you in Massachusetts, there's additional protections for people in that situation where you've done a plea. They're very lenient with the Padilla motions, particularly if your attorney specifically did not give you warnings. Like, I'll give you an example. For instance, generic immigration warnings doesn't fly in Massachusetts. If you're convicted for instance, like a drug offense and it's an aggravated felony, your attorney just saying, hey, you may be deported is not sufficient in Massachusetts. Under Commonwealth versus De Jesus, the holding of that particular decision said, even if the judge gives you immigration warning, and even if your lawyer tells you you may be deported, that's still not sufficient to meet the requirements of Padilla. They have to tell you specifically it's an aggravated felony and you have absolutely no options for relief before you take that plea. So there's a lot of loopholes in Massachusetts to overturn convictions, and that's why I said it's a niche. It's
You're in
called
a wonderful
post-conviction
circuit
relief.
over there. You're in a wonderful circuit. I'm in Florida, so I don't have those
Yes,
luxuries. But
yes,
we do try. But Florida is a little bit tougher on.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
Yeah, so I'm going to run through the rest of the comments on Facebook, guys. So if there are any ones you want to respond to, just kind of take a note of it. So let's see who we have here. We have Janelle. Janine Sharpless, good evening, everyone on this live. Nice to see you, Janine. Akil Anthony, I've dealt with Tamika Jude, who helped me obtain certain documents. Amazing, quick service. Definitely recommend to others. And as Akil is mentioning that, ladies, go ahead in the private chat area. Can you type in your contact information so that anyone who needs your services will be able to reach out to you? So put it in the private chat area, and I'll be sure to post it on all the platforms where we are live streaming right now. Kyle Sorrendo, good night to you. Nice to see Tika Jude. Hard-working lawyer. Well, nice to see everyone, Kyle, right? So let's see who else we have, because we have quite a few comments. And then when we come back from the comments, Alex, I'm coming over to you for any thoughts you would like to share at this point. So let's continue with the comments. So Kyle says, what is the difference between a green card and visa? Because I was thinking if a person... Visa, a citizen. So I'm not sure what you're asking, Kyle, but I think your question is what is the difference between a visa and a green card? And let's see who else we have. Edna, good luck with Trump administration. Ebony, nice to see you. Kendra Nicholas, my darling Portia, proud moments. Let's see who else we have. Stacia Daniel, who says sad. Claudia says, but how can someone have a child in the U.S., let's assume 12 years, and the parent is illegal? Could that person file for permanent residency? So guys, just take a note of anything you want to respond to. Sacred Empress, thanks heaven for checks and balances. Let's see who else we have. And she also says only Black and brown immigrants. What about the Irish, Italians, Greeks, etc.? White immigrants, they forgetting who built America. Rosa Emmanuel, thanks for hosting this program. Rosa, you're welcome. And she says, very informative. Christine Roberts and my cousin, Anito, I'm in trading. Nice to see you. That is Annette, I'm in trading, Portia. You're from the Baptist crew. You remember her?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
She says, Portia, I am so proud of you. So guys, thank you for joining us. And this program really epitomizes the purpose that we do Roots Connections, to be able to engage our experts using technology and using the power of radio, social media, podcasts to get the information out there. As for example, today we're looking at the U.S. immigration crackdown and the implication for our community. So guys, don't forget to share the live, share this information, copy the link, post it to your WhatsApp so folks can get the information that they need as we try to navigate these very uncertain times. My friend Basilia Tusa, nice to see you. Are there any impact or DACA recipients? So guys, anything you want to respond to in terms of the questions that we're posting? And then Alex, I want to come over to you.
Well, I think there was a question about the distinction between a green card and a visa. Well, technically, a green card is a visa. The distinction is it's an immigrant visa versus a non-immigrant visa. So F1 status, R1 status, those are non-immigrant visas. But if you have a green card, it's an immigrant visa. So that's the simple distinction.
Okay. Tamika, anything you want to comment on?
The question about the 12-year-old. A 12-year-old child cannot file for a parent. They have to be 21 to do so. If you are in removal, now there are different attorneys, and attorneys have different things. However, I have gotten removal proceedings. Well, I don't know if it could still happen now, but I've gotten removal proceedings terminated just based on the fact that that person has an underage child. That does not fly in every single immigration court. There are judges who will tell you, so what? But it is possible to get something. Well, it was possible to get something called prosecutorial discretion. I am hearing that a lot of the PD offices are telling people, hey, not the PD office, but the immigration office, ICE, not ICE, DHS. It's so many different departments. So DHS has responded to people's prosecutorial discretion requests by saying that inbox is currently closed and they're not accepting any requests. But there was a time where you could request prosecutorial discretion even if you had no relief, and they would take into consideration the positive discretionary factors. That does not mean that your attorney should not still explore those alternatives. The most they could say is no.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. So, Alex, let me come to you, and then, ladies, when we come back, I want you to give us some advice. Maybe I haven't asked the question, but some advice, especially if you are confronted by ICE, if you're stopped at the airport. I'm even hearing that green card holders can be apprehended pretty much if you're on public transportation, if you're riding a Greyhound. What documents would you recommend that people carry with them at this point? So just general advice that you would like to provide to our audience at this point. And I will also go ahead and share the contact information that you sent me. But Viva Mamo is here with us. And Viva Mamo says, nice to see you, Alex, Powell, Bruno, and Tika Jude, and also nice to see Portia, right, Viva? So nice to see all of us. So, Alex, let me come to you because this begs the question, and I'm happy you opened the door to looking beyond just immigration, because as you say, immigration is more than a legal issue. Immigration as a psychological and political affair. It may even have a mental tragic episode under the current circumstances. So let us broaden the conversation, Alex, and talk about if we're now looking at potentially even folks who may have to self-deport. I'm learning new terms every day. Self-deport and return to their islands. Have we invested in our own islands, our own countries, where we can potentially absorb these new residents to our island? So let's broaden the conversation and let's hear your thoughts on that and anything else you would like to share at this point, Alex. You're muted.
Okay, first of all, Simone, ICE means immigration and custom enforcement.
Yes.
You know, so sometimes we have to break it down to people who may not know exactly what it means. And any country has the right to extract people who are not documented. So we are not frowning on what America is doing. We're just trying to define it. In terms of what we do for the people who are being sent back, I think countries like Dominica and other such Caribbean countries should be taking advantage of not just the people returning to their country, but other citizens from Mexico and other places, Haiti, to try to create programs maybe whereby we can attract them to come to our country to develop our country, because it is the immigrants who have developed America. So if there is a major program to get rid of immigrants in America, which does not really make a lot of sense because America is a land of immigrants before it became a land of laws. As long as you take away the immigration factor in America, you're kind of going against what America was designed to be. Mm-hmm. So countries like Dominica, which is severely underpopulated, must now be willing to embrace new citizens, those returning back to Dominica and those from other countries who might want a different country to settle in. We need people to work our farms and to do other programs. So it will be savvy of our government to kind of take advantage of this crisis, create certain programs, certain government policies to embrace new citizens, to have greater capital. And when you have one, in terms of numbers, and when you have bigger population, the economy kind of works better. So that's what I would do if I had to give a suggestion. As family, as relatives, as friends, as community, those Dominicans who are going to be sent back, unfortunately, are going to need our help. They're going to need our love. They're going to need our assistance. They're going to need to be re-assimilated into our community. So the priests, pastors, lawyers on the ground, community leaders, politicians, we need to find ways to support the people who are facing this deportation matter. I mean, I think it was Portia who said earlier on, or I think it was Tamika, one of them, that they had clients
or know of people who committed suicide upon deportation. And I'm happy that we took a broader view, not just the legalities of immigration, but the socio-psychological impact that it has on the people, their family, and their communities. So one immigrant returning to Dominica can change the culture of our country, our community that that person is deported to. So we really need to be ready to change gears and to cushion the impact that's going to be felt by the people who are being deported and their community, their family, their immediate residents, their former loved ones, and stuff like that.
Yeah, and we also have to change the mindset as well, because the videos might be funny, but the reality is kind of sad when we see videos being posted of people saying, "Oh, you never sent me anything.
Yeah.
So if you come back to this country, I don't have space for you in my house." And then another
borderline, put a trip in you, is borderline insensitive.
Yes.
And I don't know what the learned lawyers think here, but not everything you should memorize for musing a word. You should not create memes of people suffering.
Right.
You know, maybe you can, but I don't think it is the nicest thing to do. I laugh at a couple of them, but some of them are a little bit, borderline. And I think this is serious times. I mean, the lawyers here can tell you about that. People have serious concerns about their status. Even people who are already in the process and are wondering, am I going to be processed? And they're querying. So
that is an important point, because I had someone who is my age group, I think last year, that had gone and whatever happened, they decided they wanted to be deported because of course they didn't have an attorney, they didn't have advice. By the time I was called, it was kind of too late. And one of the conversations I had with the family is offer that person support, because the community is going to ridicule that person. The community is going to make jokes. And if you're not strong, you can go off, because people can be very cruel to you. Like the stuff Alex said, that, "Oh, I don't have space for you," those type of things. Like, I have had people in removal proceedings that they didn't get removed, but the fact that people heard that they were picked up by ICE, they were all on Facebook. My grandmother had a thing saying, "I'm making jugalas behind them." Like, "Oh, you coming back down? You think you're all that? Look, now you coming back down. You don't come back with nothing. You don't have a..." So that is the mentality of our people. We're gonna make fun of people because something happened and it's unfortunate that they may have to return to the country. And instead of embracing them, we don't consider their mental health. We don't consider their children. We don't consider their families. All we care about is to make the joke and to post the status to get the most likes and the most reactions. We need to be more sensitive to people. Our mental health system in Dominica is not the strongest, and it is not the best. So we need to be kind. We need to afford people grace, because a lot of times the same people can come here and rebuild their lives, rebuild themselves. I have had people that when they come to me and I see their situation, I tell the family, I tell them how much the legal fees are going to be. I literally will tell them to save your money. You're going to have to start over in a new country. And I know it's stupid for a lawyer to, instead of making the money, tell somebody to save it. But
ethically.
Yeah, there was somebody when I said to him, "Hey, we can fight this, but you've already lied in front of the judge. You have no credibility. This application is not going to be approved. You can pay me this $25,000 cash, or your family can hold on to that $25,000 and help you to restart your life and rebuild your life." And that person called me recently for Christmas. I don't know how he remembered the number. He called and he was like, "No, I want to thank you so much. When I got back to my country, I was able to, pay some rent. I was able to do whatever. Now I have a farm. Now I'm doing this. I'm opening a business. And if you had taken that money from me when I got down there, I would have had nothing." So again, it's important when the lawyer tells you that you may not necessarily have a case, get a second opinion. But it makes sense to beat a dead horse. You have a murder conviction, you have an ICE hold, they pick you up. The lawyer tells you, "Hey, there's nothing we can understand. There's nothing to do. You're going to pay me $50,000, but you're still going to get deported." and you're not
Right.
going to have that money anymore, and I'm not going to give it back to you after you get deported. So
Right. And let me, and Portia, I want to come to you, but something else we have to add on top of another layer we have to add, Alex and everyone, is the fact that now we're seeing in Florida, Tamika states, where the governor is now trying to implement a rule that if you are undocumented, that pretty much if you're going to send remittances back to your country, that you have to prove that you have legal status in this country. So, Alex, how is that going to impact the remittances? And he's saying in that statement that this is going to start with Florida, but his hope is that it will extend beyond Florida to the other states. So the implications of all of that on the remittances sent to Dominica, because we know that millions of dollars are sent in remittances from the U.S. to Dominica.
Yeah, and we are a port state. We are a very significant state, and because the governor's party has a supermajority in Florida, it's going to be easy for those policies to go through. In fact, I think they're also speaking about trying to empower ICE to work with the highway patrol. So highway patrol too, they cannot detain you for immigration matters, but they can refer the matter to ICE, and ICE gets you. Well, you are detained by them, and until ICE pick you up. So they actually are doing that as well. I just came back from the city, the capital. That's why I was driving in, and they were discussing House Senate Bill S-244, which is saying that if you are an education institution in America, in Florida, you need to be able to have 85% registration before you can accept undocumented students. I mean, this is serious times in Florida. And it is so serious because the Republican Party has a supermajority. So yes, that's going to be very impacting. The remittances could diminish. And that's not going to impact, it's going to impact Dominica more than you think, because we depend and rely on remittances from Americas. I mean, in fact, most of the agricultural produce that we have on the shelves, although they're not remittances, but they come from Florida. So Florida is quite significant when it comes to feeding the Caribbean, feeding Dominica. Florida is like the breadbasket of the Caribbean. People used to go to the farms before. Now they wait on the flights to come in with the stuff from Florida. And those remittances, those boxes, those barrels, man, those crates, this might eventually dry because people are just not going to take the chance. People are just not going to be able to do it. They're going to say, you know what, I'm not going to be bothered by that. So that will not supplement what it had been doing in Dominica. And that puts some more hardship on families and communities. So the problem is graver. Is graver the word, or more grave than we think with what the governor of Florida is attempting to do.
Right.
I was gonna say in Massachusetts we sort of have a different take on the issue, because in Massachusetts law enforcement tend not to go above and beyond to assist ICE. Obviously, they're not going to circumvent immigration laws and step on toes, but not like in Florida where they'll go out of their way to call ICE and say, "Hey, this person is being released. You need to be here in an hour," so you can pick them up in the parking lot, because that's what some counties will do when they have that type of relationship. But in Massachusetts, that doesn't happen. Also, I know that one of the things that the administration did too was sign an executive order allowing ICE to do enforcement action in sensitive places. In Massachusetts, it's still very difficult for them to do that because they can't come into courthouses. They usually arrest the people in the parking lots. They don't come into the courthouses, particularly if it's not a criminal court. Let's say, for instance, it's a family court. They can't come in non-criminal courthouses and make arrests. So they're still trying to see if there's things that can be done as long as it doesn't circumvent, federal laws. But it's a little bit more immigrant friendly in cities like Boston. And I'm not sure for New York anymore, but I know for sure in Boston, it's more immigrant friendly.
Yeah, and let me stay with you, Portia, because let's go into the part of the program where we're providing advice. So if you're a green card holder, for example, should you be walking with your green card? I saw this video, the video I just clipped to the Facebook and the YouTube platforms that says you have a right to remain silent. So what should we do if ICE approaches you? What steps should we be taking at this point to protect ourselves, to ensure that we're doing the right things, both in terms of being approached at the airport, maybe if you're traveling, because it seems like, you may be even stopped if you're like maybe on a Greyhound bus and a train traveling somewhere. So what is the advice from both you and Tamika in terms of what should we be doing at this point, in addition to ensuring that we have those measures in place to protect our children, to have somebody have access to our accounts? What else should we be doing?
Well, one of the things I would say first is there is a distinction between green card holders and people who are undocumented. If you're undocumented and you're just accused of a crime, it could bring ICE to your doorstep. Essentially, they know you've been arrested, you've been accused of something. They can literally come to your house and get you if they know where you live. With a green card holder, it's a little bit different, though. You have to have a conviction for them to deport you. So green card holders have a little bit more protections, but obviously if you get a conviction, all that stuff goes out the window. So that's a distinction I'd make. Then the other important thing to note is, and I've seen it before, where ICE will use certain letters with signatures from directors and pretend like it's a warrant with a judge's signature to try to I guess, mislead immigrants into opening their doors and engaging with them. What I would suggest, if they come to your home and they knock your door, I wouldn't open the door unless they can slide under the door a proper warrant. Learn how to inspect those warrants and look for a judge's signature. The name of all immigration judges are on the eoir.gov website. So look for the name of the judge and see if you can find their names on one of the list of who the judges are in a particular area, and just try to do your best to authenticate whether or not it's a warrant signed by a judge. And obviously, if it's a warrant signed by a judge, you have to comply. And then obviously you put your plan into action in terms of, securing an attorney, having people look after your kids. You have a plan in place. But I would suggest to people, if they come to your house, you can be cordial, you can be respectful, but you're not obligated to speak with ICE. Don't provide any documentation to them. Don't tell them the sky is blue. Other than identify yourself with your name, you don't really have anything else you need to say to them. You can just wait for them to process you. You make your phone calls and you put your plan in motion. That would be my advice.
Thank you, Tamika.
Okay, so I actually did do a Know Your Rights flyer that I did put on Facebook. But what I will use an example of a FaceTime I got this week, and I do have permission to share that client. So I got a call that also brings into play a lot of other developments in Florida. So I got a call from a client who I know is in the middle of divorce proceedings, and he said to me that we were on the phone talking, and he was telling me that his wife, told him that she was going to get him deported so she could get the house. While we're on the phone, there's a knock at the door. Wow. So the person knocked very hard. So he went to the window and he told me, there's 2 sheriffs outside. I said, sheriff, you don't have a criminal history. Like, did you commit any crime? Like, why would the sheriff be at your door? And he said to me, I don't know. I told him, okay, be careful. Those might not be sheriffs. I said, move to another window in the house and look outside. What do you see? He told me, I see 2 sheriff's cars and 2 black unmarked vehicles. So I said to him, that's ICE. He said, you sure it's ICE? I said, that's ICE. Because the black unmarked vehicles were telltale signs that it was ICE. And the sheriff's office, why do they need 2 cars? Even if you committed a crime, unless you committed some huge crime, they're not sending 2 officers to arrest you at your house. And if they were going to arrest you, they would not be knocking, saying, come outside, come outside. So I told him, be quiet. He said, should I answer? Should I let them know I'm here? I said, no, stay quiet. So he was standing behind the door. While he's standing there, somebody comes out of one of the unmarked vehicles with an ICE vest, with a vest, but all in black, with a vest written ICE, police ICE on it. And they walk up to the door and they say, well, we see the car. So why can't y'all just knock the door down? Why are we still here knocking? He's in the house. And the officers were like, we're already helping you out here, but we cannot break the door. We cannot break the door down. Like, we don't have that warrant. And the guy was like, no, just say you have a warrant. Tell him you have a warrant for his arrest. Ask him to come outside and we can get him. So the officers were like, nah, man, we ain't trying to do that right now. So that happened and they left. So after they left, my client was like panicking. He was like, oh my God, like, what do I do? Like, I said, yo, relax. He said, but they know where I live. I said, you know what I need you to do? I need you to pack a bag. Go somewhere. Don't tell me where you're going. Don't tell nobody. Go somewhere that your ex-wife or your wife does not know that you could go. Leave the house because, of course, you need to get your medical done so that you can file this case based on this very abusive woman. And he did that. And by the time he got to another friend's house, he's calling me again. And he sends me ring camera footage of the police again and ICE going to one of his best friend's houses looking for him, asking them, what do they know about him? Do they know his whereabouts? Where does he go after work? So he stayed quiet and he did not go outside. And that is why he is free today. So the moral of this story is you don't have to answer them. If they have a warrant that they can come into the house, they're not going to ask you to come outside. They're going to tell you, we're going to come in to get you because we have a warrant. We can. The fact that they're just knocking, telling you come outside, or can we come in to speak to you? They need permission to come into your house. Do not ever give anybody permission to come to your house. Think of it as like vampires. You know, in the vampire movies, you heard that they need permission to come in your house. Think of ICE as vampires. Don't give them permission to come into your house. Also, do not go outside to meet them. They cannot breach your curtilage. If you have a screened-in porch, they have to stay there because that muddles your curtilage, which is like part of the privacy of your home. So do not go outside. Do for some reason answer before you realize who it is. ICE, we need to speak to you. I'm not going to speak to you. I'm exercising my rights. I'm not obligated to speak to you. They say, okay, well, we have a warrant. Slide the warrant under the door, just like attorney said. If it's a judicial warrant, it will be signed by a judge. Now, an ICE warrant is different from a judicial warrant. An ICE will say, it will have like your alien number and stuff like that at the top of it, but you will see it signed by an officer, a field officer or something, because their title is always under that signature. I've never seen one where it's just a name and no title. So they're required to have on that document. They cannot come into your home. Second, document the entire encounter. If you have a ring camera, save that video. If you have a cell phone, record everything that happens, because if your rights are breached, you can use that as evidence later on. So that's usually the advice. Do not speak to them. Don't give them any information about yourself. They're going to ask you where you're from. Those type of questions. Do not answer those questions. That's what you do if they knock on your door. Now, if you're walking on the street and you're approached by an ICE officer, the officer says, hey, wait up. I want to talk to you. Hey, what's your name? If you give your name, because at that point, you may not even know who it is. You could say, my name is John Doe. But when it becomes, where are you from? How long have you been here? How did you do not answer any of those questions? A lot of attorneys have been telling people to carry their passport with them. That is giving them the proof of alienage that they need for your notice to appear. Do not carry your passport if you don't have it, and do not give any fake documents. That's another thing. If you have a fake driver's license you use or a fake social security, you're better off ditching that before they pick you up. Because if they find it on your person, even if you do not present it to them, you're going to get charged for being in possession of those documents. And even if you don't present it to them, in my experience, they always say you gave it to them as ID, even if you didn't give it to them. So if they approach you, you do not have to give them any information. Let's say you do have a pending case and they know, let's say they call your name. They say, hey, John Doe, we need to talk to you. That means they already know who you are. So remaining silent at that point, they know everything they need to know. Doesn't really make sense. You still don't give them information about your case. But let's say you have your work permit with you, something, and they ask, are you authorized to be in the States or whatever? You can, if you want, you can present your work permit. I have had people say that they presented notices, work permit, and they were released. They were not kept. But generally, you do not give them any information and you do not carry anything on you that can be used to deport you. The things they can use to deport you are your birth certificate and your passport. A lot of people, for whatever reason, figure because they're undocumented, they need to walk around with a passport. The passport is a passport for you to get deported, and you just give it to them, which means deporting you is a lot easier because normally they have to go for a certain process to get that travel document from your country. Your country has to agree to take you back. They have to create a travel document for you if you don't have one. I have had people who, without speaking to an attorney, ICE says, we need your passport, and they ask their mother to mail it to ICE. And then as the attorney, you come on the case and you're like,
I don't want to laugh.
and you're asking the family, hey, I need to file the asylum application for you. Where's your passport?
Where's the passport?
ICE has it.
Twice.
Guys, we shouldn't laugh.
Oh, they said if I give them the passport, they'll release me.
No, that's a trap.
But guys, you know, we're sharing a lot of good information here, and I just want to remind everyone who's listening and watching that you can simply go back and check the replay. So even if you're not on Facebook, you can always go to YouTube, Q95 FM Radio, and click the replay button, or just click the play button on Facebook, Q95 FM Radio, or push past 10, and you can catch the entire program. You can slow down where you need to slow down to hear exactly what we talked about, the advice that was given today. So don't forget that once the program ends, you can also check out the replay. But I want to go around the table, and ladies and Alex, thank you so much for this invaluable information that you shared with us today. I'm sure that, you know, we learned a lot of information, because Tamika is correct. You hear so many people talking about, oh, walk with your passport, walk with your passport. But what we're not realizing is that just makes it easier for you to get deported. So we really got some invaluable information today, and maybe later down in the year, we can come back and just do some updates on where we are and what we're doing right now. But Alex, can we say elections have consequences, and consequences we do not anticipate? So Alex, should we have known that all of this would transpire? Now we're seeing the unprecedented role of Elon Musk running amok in the White House, who is now responsible for 50 agencies and has access to all kinds of information. I had lunch with a friend of mine who is a federal employee today, and she said the emails are relentless. They are unable to do their jobs because now they're spending more time on taking down information on DEI programs, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, and it is just wreaking havoc on the mental health of the people that she works with. So, you know, when we say elections have consequences, those are the consequences. And of course, we're talking about, you know, the crackdown on immigration today. So, Alex, your thoughts on should we have expected this?
Yes, we should have. Most people who supported the present regime or government or administration did not expect them to be so aggressive. For instance, the pardoning, wholesale pardoning of all the J6 convicts, that didn't rub people very well, but now people are reacting with shock, because most of what they said was, we don't expect him to do what he said he's going to do. He's just talking. Now that he's doing, people are quietly saying, but why he's actually doing those things, that's not good, that's not sustainable. So yeah, we should have, because the president, when he was the 45th, did everything that he said he was going to do. And this time he said he's going to do more. So he's doing exactly what he was said he was going to do. And the worst thing about it is that he is going to be termed out after this term. He's not going to be able to run again. He don't care about running again.
You think so? You see, he's trying to make changes so he can run again, right?
Yeah, I know he is, but that's...
And he has the majority. I wouldn't be surprised if these foolish people allow that, to be honest. They voted him in.
If it called for an amendment...
It definitely will, and he has the Supreme Court, so we'll see what happens. If that
but then my other thing is the same people who thought that this was going to bring great economic opportunities, because you heard a lot of people saying the reason they voted for him is that it was going to bring a lot of economic opportunities. Most of them are the ones who are going to suffer, because with the increasing tariffs and increasing prices, everybody's going to pay more at the gas pump and at the grocery store.
And herein lies the problem, because he's not doing anything to bring the cost of inflation down. In fact, what he's doing is going to make it worse. He's talking about tariff. And for people who don't understand quickly, tariff is a tax placed on goods imported from a country. The people who pay for the tariff are the people who buy the goods, the Americans. So it's more pain for America. Now, if you prefer to buy the made in America goods, you cannot compete with China, because China has billions of people willing to work for 50 cents a day. Americans do not work for less than maybe $15, $20 an hour. How are you going to compete with China in production? So if you increase the tariff on China, the goods go up. That means people might buy the American goods, but they spend more money. So tariff is not a punishment for any country. It's punishing you, the American people. So the price is not going to come down anytime soon. It's going to go up. Eggs have gone up, Sinks.
But also the Chinese are pretty smart, because what they're doing is they're sending the assembly products to Mexico and put a tag made in Mexico, and that's how they're avoiding the tariffs. So when you think you're taxing China, you're not really taxing China. So they're finding ways to circumvent those tariffs too.
Yeah, and also the damage that he's doing to our neighbors. Canada is infuriated, and they're talking about striking back because of the tariffs that he's implementing, the damage he's doing to, allies of the U.S., Mexico, Canada, and just, the level of damages that are being done with friends of the U.S. So again, elections have consequences.
All friends.
Elections have consequences, but many countries, including my homeland, don't seem to believe that elections have consequences. So I am a very neutral party. I sit on the fence. I don't take a side, but I do observe that even with everything that's happening, Alex, I would not be surprised if probably he puts Elon Musk or another person with his same ideologies follows him and people will vote for him again. Yep. Because we've seen time and time again that people vote.
Well,
popularism.
You're right. MAGA is the new Republican. Republican has converted into MAGAism. So MAGA will continue fighting for a while to come. He cannot run again, even if he wants to. I don't think it's going to happen. He may go to the Supreme Court, and his same people on the Supreme Court are going to tell him, you know what? No, we're going to have to rule based on the letters.
Fed up of him.
Yeah, because at the end of the day,
they might have to pull him kicking and screaming, though, because I don't think he wants to leave. Another January 6th may be inevitable.
Yeah, but they're not going to let him do it again. I mean, I believe.
I don't think we know that now, because I don't know. My political experiences from present have shown me that people will surprise you with the way that they'll vote.
Just the same as the Supreme Court?
You would think that it's always common sense. You'd think that this might be common sense, that you're suffering based on Trump's policies. Like, why would you? Like, when this man was saying I didn't think he was gonna win this time, because I was just like, who would vote for somebody that have those extreme ideologies? And here were people,
and they did.
Venezuelans were now on Instagram crying, he used this. He said he was going to target illegals. Now he's targeting people here illegally. Like, why did they think they want exception?
Right. But guys, the time is not our friend. This has been a wonderful, informative program. Marvelyn Brady says, I heard that immigration is asking green card holders at the airport to sign a document that cancels the green card. Is that true? So that's going to be the last question. If anybody wants to take it.
That. It has always been the practice, and it has always been the law, that if at the port of entry it is determined that you may have abandoned your residency, that they may tell you have a choice. You're either going to remain in the U.S. or you're going to remain in your country. But they cannot force you to sign that form. They also do not have the power to take your green card away from you. So this is a new thing started by a Facebook video of a lady saying that this is happening at the airport. I personally know people who've been presented in that form way before President Trump was ever in there. It's part of the immigration process. You cannot expect to go and sit down Dominica eating mango for 3 years and then try to come back on a green card. Come on. You cannot decide you want to go there and study man for 5 years. And then when he break up with you, you take your children, you take your Jola, and you try to come back into America. You have to use your common sense. There is a certain period of time that you are allowed to remain outside the U.S. But if you that period, then you can expect to face scrutiny at the airport. But they cannot take your green card away from you, and they cannot force you to sign that form.
Is it
Yeah, they
safe?
usually put you in deportation proceedings.
Yeah, the
Okay.
judge is who can
Yeah.
take your permanent residence.
It has to be a
So we're
court.
going to come back for a round of final thoughts, but let me just take a couple of comments before we go. Jefferson Winston, good work. Thank you, Jefferson, for being here. Let's see. He also says, which other islands had all this information? Well done. Thank you, Jefferson. Let's just take a couple very quickly. Talifa Charles, Tamika, you're on point. Viva Mama says, such a great program, a blend of practical legal advice supported with rich socio-economic political discussion. Love it. Thank you, Viva Momo. Louisa, I know it's very late for you. It's 2 a.m. in the UK, so thank you for being up late with us. So guys, thank you so much for being here. So let us just get your final thoughts as we wind down, and maybe we can reconvene sometime later this year to just kind of, touch on the new developments. So Portia, thank you for being here. Your final
Certainly.
thoughts as we wind down.
Well, I have to say it's been a pleasure to be on the panel with Tamika. I never met you before, but it was a pleasure. And you as well, Alex. And it was excellent to see you again, Simone. So yes, I enjoyed the conversation. I'd be happy to discuss offline, but certainly it was a pleasure. And then one other thing I would just add that people can try to do to just make sure that they haven't been deported in absentia. A lot of times people that cross the border, they are given a paper to come back to court and they never show up, and they just think that it went away, but it actually didn't. They were deported in their absence. And if they have a deportation order, they're actually at more risk of being deported than anybody else. So I just want to point that out. Go on eoir.gov, plug in your A number, and just make sure you haven't been deported already.
Excellent. Thank you. And let me share your contact information before we forget, because we know not everyone is on Facebook and YouTube. So if you're listening and you would like to get in touch with attorney Portia Charles Collaz, it is 617-990-6792. Again, 617-990-6792. And she is in the Massachusetts, the Boston area. But of course, with technology, we know that we can connect with you wherever you are. And attorney Tamika Jude is info@judelawoffice.com. So info at Jude, JUDELAWOFFIC.com. So info@judelawoffice.com. And one more time, Portia is 617-990-6792. And of course, if you already know, if you need any additional information, you can reach out to me at pushpast10@gmail.com, pushpast10@gmail.com. Tamika, your final thoughts. Thank you again for being here.
I enjoyed being here. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I will say that I can talk about immigration all day. I don't know if you know this. It's just something I'm very passionate about. Very passionate about immigrants' rights. So I'm happy to be here and willing to.
Yes, excellent. I think, did you stick for a minute? Yes, excellent. Thank you, Tamika. Professor Alex Bruno, your final thoughts.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to share a panel with ladies. I think it's quite empowering for me to really learn from sisters who are learned, and those who are not quite as learned as well. It's just good to really share views with women. It's kind of a different kind of a character and feel when you speak on those panels with women. And I'm happy as well that you allowed us to broaden the discussion away from the letters of the law and into the real practical issues that really confront the immigrants in the socio-political issues. So I'm happy that the ladies were willing to share in that conversation. And Simon, thanks again. I'm looking forward to doing it again sometime in the future.
Yes, certainly. So thank you, Lambi, for being on the console, the Q95 family, Mr. G, showing everyone. Thank you for your support with these programs and all the wonderful work that we continue to do here on Q95. So thank you again to our audience, our radio audience, our Facebook and our YouTube audience, as we engaged in this conversation on the U.S. immigration crackdown implications for our communities. We were joined by attorneys at law, who both own their law practices, Mrs. Portia Charles Collaz, as well as Miss Tamika Jude. And we were also joined by Professor of Political Science, Mr. Alex Bruno. So guys, thank you for being here. I'm your host, Simone Matthews. Always wonderful to be on this journey with you as we continue to harness the power of technology, social media, international radio, and podcast to leverage the expertise of our Dominican and Caribbean brothers and sisters around the world to our benefit. And I think we did a beautiful job here this evening doing just that. So again, if you would like to reach out to me, you have some important work that you're doing surrounding some important change and organization, a project that you're doing, you can always reach me at pushpast10@gmail.com, pushpast10@gmail.com. And let me just say, I'm actually booked all the way through April because there's so many people doing good work for the benefits of Dominicans at home and abroad. So we are cleared and booked all the way through the first week of April. So I want to thank everyone who continues to reach out to me to help to move our country, our people, and our region forward. So with that, we can say good evening. Say bye.
Good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for being
Bye,
here.
everyone.
Tamika, Portia, Lambi, thank
Bye.
you again. And with that, enjoy the rest of your week. Happy Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is on Friday. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone who will celebrate Valentine's Day. So guys, thank you again and have a good
night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Oh, everybody.
Roots Connections on Q, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. every other Wednesday on Q95, the big station. Dominicans journeyed beyond our shores for decades in search of economic opportunities and educational advancement.